And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis looks much like it did yesterday. Still some ice here along the central Arctic coast and some along the eastern Arctic coast as well. And probably won't be much change from this tomorrow or the day after from that pattern. And for tonight, weak front here, keeping it cloudy and kind of showery here through the central interior, right on down the Yukon and Yukon River Valley into the Delta. To the south, dry, as this system here stays near Kodiak Island, begins to start to pull off to the east. A few showers are on the east side of Kodiak Island tonight, tending to diminish and end tomorrow morning. Otherwise, high pressure, dry, light winds, all of the Bering Sea, that low, very weak, not producing much in the way of wind at all, and dry over the Panhandle. Maybe some low clouds, fog, and possibly drizzle here, especially along the north coast. And for Tuesday, mostly sunny, warm, high 60s and into the lower to mid 70s across all southern Alaska, Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, right down into Bristol Bay, Panhandle as well. Could be some morning low stuff. It'll burn off in the afternoon along the coast. Otherwise, this low now finally trying to track, or is tracking off to the east a little bit there. And eventually it'll just take off to the southeast, won't even be a factor for the southeast coast at all. And then the next one here, we're watching beginning to develop, actually off the chart there. But this next front here pulling rain into the northwest interior, again, kind of another widespread area of light rain. And that still trails out to this weak low back to the west over the northwest Bering Sea. This front is really washed out through here. And taking a look at it Wednesday, that system comes up a little stronger now, so kind of signifying a change in the pattern that's going to occur here over southern, or actually all of mainland Alaska, beginning Wednesday with this arrival, and then Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday for windy, wet conditions over southern Alaska, and to a lesser extent over the eastern North Gulf Coast. Anyway, this low tracks off to the southeast there, high pressure in the Gulf. Another nice day over the Panhandle, temperatures in the 60s to lower 70s. Same thing here for the Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound. Remnants of this frontal boundary keeps a few scattered showers going either side of that front out to the northern Bering Sea. Dry, light winds, North Slope, Arctic coast. And for marine forecast, small craft advisories along the south coast here. Northwest winds 25 knots, seas 7 to 9 feet. Northwest winds 15 knots on the north coast. And light west winds at 10 knots. The central coast, northwest at 15, north coast light out of the west. And the inside waters, variable winds at 10 knots with seas running at about 2 feet. And then for Wednesday, no change here over the inside waters. Wednesday, light and variable at about 10 knots or less with light northwest winds out along the coast at about 10 knots with seas down to 3 feet. Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island tomorrow, variable winds at 10 knots and seas running 2 to 3 feet. Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, variable winds at 10 knots with 1 to 2 foot seas. And for Wednesday, Cook Inlet, still light variable winds in the forecast at about 10 knots, southeast 15 for Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands here south at 15. Light variable winds for the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. And for Tuesday, Kodiak Island, variable winds at 10 knots. Bristol Bay, variable winds at 10 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula, variable winds 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. Big change on Wednesday with that next system coming up toward the eastern Aleutian. So small craft advisory winds now for the Alaska Peninsula out of the east and southeast, 25 to 30 knots. Higher gusts, maybe to 45 there around Cold Bay. And then the Kodiak Island area, variable to south winds 10 to 15 knots. In Bristol Bay, southeast winds increasing to 30 knots, but seas still down around 3 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, tomorrow, Tuesday, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Adak and Atka, east winds 15 knots. And east to south winds at 15 for the western Aleutians. From Kiska to Shemya, variable winds on Wednesday at 10 knots. Amchitka Island, north to northwest at 15 knots. Central Aleutians, north winds 20 knots. Seas now 4 to 6 feet there. And windier there with that lope coming up just south of the eastern Aleutians there. So looking at east to northeast winds, 20 to 30 knots with seas building up to 7 feet. And for the southwest coast, west to southwest winds here, 10 to 15 knots, variable at 10 for the Pribilof, southwest at 20 for St. Matthew Island, 20 to 25 knot winds, Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. Much lighter winds up that way on Wednesday. St. Lawrence Island, southwest at 5 with 2-foot seas, southwest 10 for Norton Sound, northeast at 15 for the Yukon Delta coast with 3-foot seas, east winds 20 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, Pribilof, small craft advisory, northeast winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Eastern Boulevard Sea Coast tomorrow, south to southeast winds at 15, south 20 for the western coast. Small craft advisories here with that incoming front here on the western Arctic coast, west at 25 and southwest 20 knot winds for the Chukchi Sea. Then on Wednesday, small craft advisories for much of the Arctic coast now out of the west, 25 to 30 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, north to northeast at 10 to 20 knots.